Fellow travelers, join us on a journey into dissonance, a sense-making sojourn through humanist nightmare fuel. If you are receiving this transmission, then you too are part of the resistance.
I see you.
Hey travelers, in today's stream, Dr. Siraj and I discuss men's rights activism. There are certainly issues affecting men in grave numbers. Unrealistic social expectations of being a man, unexamined behavioral health issues, mass incarceration, exploitive labor, and police brutality, just to name a few. Are these the issues being discussed by some of today's most charismatic men's rights activists? Or are the same few people who are accustomed to holding power using that platform to isolate and manipulate others in order to maintain that power? You be the judge as we listen in now.
So this is kind of a tough topic to get into, because I mean, just between the two of us as we're sitting here, you know, we've covered a lot of ground even so far with Humanist Nightmare Fuel. You know, we've brought in our kind of shared developmental awareness of different people's individual issues with identity development, how individual issues may begin to form a kind of collective, in the sense that there are individuals who may feel a non-traditional energy of being marginalized, in the sense that these are individuals who are not traditionally marginalized in social spaces, cultural spaces, institutional spaces. And because there is a perceived rise in building towards equity in professional spaces, social, cultural spaces, whatever the case is, there is this it exists. I'm not going to qualify it. I can say it's patently bullshit, or I can say, well, you know, it's fair to, you know, fair to understand that this kind of thing may occur. Like, for example, you know, a lot of people have said there was a particular cultural trajectory in this country that everybody took after President Obama came into office in 2008. You know, I mean, I remember, and I won't lie, seeing a person of color in that space. I mean, tears came to my eyes just thinking that, you know, even at the most basic, if this is possible, anything's possible. And indeed it was true, as it was possible that Barack Obama became the president and the first lady and their kids and everyone was just standing, and it was such a beautiful sight to see. It is true that anything was possible. Donald Trump became president. People felt that they needed to beat down the halls of Congress and threaten to hang people and kill people and do all of that because they didn't want to let go of Donald Trump, right? And a lot of people, when Trump first came into office, who were incredibly disillusioned on the left, they came to a space of wanting to make meaning of it. And even anecdotally, just, you know, I mean, this is out and about. I mean, we can get back into that. I don't think it's much disputed. I think there was a fair amount of conversation around the idea that this was a natural white nationalist swing back into, you know, what does it say? Make America white again. I mean, make America great again. And so as we swung into that space, there was a feeling of like, well, you had your guy for 8 years. Aren't you happy? You know, it's like, can we just get back to good old American business now? You know, like it's that kind of sensation. And there's this recoil effect kind of idea with that. And it seems that that recoil effect occurs in different spaces. It also occurs amongst cisgender men, people who identify as men, tend to be, they may have been assigned male at birth and they continue to identify as men as adults. I'm a cisgender man. I'm a cisgender straight man. So there is, a great difficulty for me, just in the sense because it's so uncomfortable, to be honest about a lot of lessons I've learned from friends, allies, teachers within communities of empowered women, within communities of transgender individuals that I've come across and begun to understand a lot of different paths that the human experience takes, in addition to, other marginalized populations of individuals, across people of color. And then, of course, there's the intersectionality that occurs amongst all of those individuals. And so there are some awarenesses that I come away with. One is the idea of just how that type of disenfranchisement works, right? And I guess, Nadine, what we're talking about is it can work, at the end of a supervisory meeting about your, you really need to do things in a better way without, kind of understanding what the actual barriers in one's life are if you are in a particularly disadvantaged position, all the way to that awareness of being disenfranchised coming at the end of a fist or any number of things like that, right? So there is that. But I suppose because there are accommodations made for individuals, relative to gender. I just want to be careful as we're saying that, relative to ethnicity, relative to race. I mean, I guess it's harder to describe the idea of equity building amongst disenfranchised populations because there's such diversity there. But weirdly, there is a weird cross-section when it comes to the recoil of white nationalism and then the subsequent recoil. So this is about, let's say, race, ethnicity, and kind of different aspects of social identity here. But in terms of gender and one's orientation, in terms of one's sexuality, in those spaces, as equity building has occurred in this space, especially in spaces of, let's say, everyone can say we could have done much more, but and much more continues to need to be done. But the idea that there were individuals for several years prior to the Trump presidency who were coming together in same-sex marriages, in relationships, openly, legally, such things were really cool to see. We had this weird glimpse into oh, is this what it looks like when we watch Star Trek? That there's all this cool, everyone's fine, it's not that oh, hey, did you see the new person at work today? Which new person are you talking about? The black one. It's why? I mean, it's right. It's 2022. Yeah. Which person are you talking about? Oh, the black kid or the black guy or the black woman, as opposed to the other person they're talking about is just the woman or the kid or the man or whoever. But then there's that one, So it's there's still that, but there's this weird correlation between the white national, just in terms of perception, just for me, right? White nationalists that I watch here, stream on YouTube, wherever, and men's rights activists. So Nadine, as you know, by way of an intro, we gave that. But as you were prepping for this particular stream, you know, you were going to tell me about it earlier, and I laughed and I said, no, man, save that for the first, bringing it first out, save that for the stream. Please share with us your initial and growing awareness of men's rights activism.
So I was just watching, right? Because as I was preparing for like, you know, like men's rights, like, first off, can I just admit that I was like, what is that? like men's, like, what, like, I had to research, because I realized it made me think, like, oh, snaps, I don't even know, you know, I have no context. So I kind of just, you know, looked at, you know, kind of searched and I found, like, it's stuff that I've felt, you know, myself, just, you know, dealing with people, with men, you know what I mean? Like, and like men that I've known in my life, you know, things
well, that's
that I've
interesting.
thought.
So, like, so you've it's pushback. You've noticed that in, like, recent times, you've received pushback from men relative to, I don't know, opportunity, relative to relational authority.
No. What I was, okay, maybe I should actually say what the context is, some context on. So basically I watched something that was like about oh my gosh, come on, brain fart, go away. It was about the things that the men's issues that are ignored and, like, overlooked or suppressed, basically, is what I gathered from it in society. And it was a woman that was talking about it, and she was talking about, like, violence. She was talking about, like, I'll just say, you know, I have to, like, go in, let me just not even glaze over that, like, the violence, especially, it wasn't just because I was very, like, my ears perked up during this part, and it was like, well, you know, what angle is she gonna come from? And it was not like, it was very holistic. I think it was like, if you're going to, like, you know, empower one group, then the answer isn't, like, to just ignore the same issue over with the other group. You know what I mean? Like, and even, like, she was talking about the, like, domestic violence, but even violence in the home of children, like, you know what I mean? Like, not, like, when a male is taught to, like, well, the way you handle that is with your fist. Don't let somebody, like, you know, don't let someone treat you in this way. Like, go be violent, go be aggressive. Then we turn around and blame the issues, like, basically she was saying, like, the men's issues that are, like, prevalent nowadays, like, it's like we turn it back around and blame it on the individual men that are dealing with it, or even the men as a whole, instead of dealing with it as a societal issue. And all of us have been a part of it, creating it, and all of us need to be a part of, like, need to address it and be a part of addressing it, a part of, you know, fixing it.
So let's sit with that one for a little bit, because that's I mean, this kind of stuff, it's so jam-packed, right? So okay, the idea that there is, let's say, the issue of domestic violence, and, you know, it may be that men's rights activists advocate for the idea that, you know, there is a perception, let's say, maybe in terms of law enforcement and the justice system, that there may be a perception that is unfair because a domestic violence case that involves a woman that is the victim of domestic violence, it may be perceived in one way through the justice process. But if the man is the victim of the domestic violence, and the woman, the partner that is in that space, is the perpetrator of that violence, it may not be perceived It may not be argued for. It may not be, the protective, the protective factors may not settle in around the male victim involved in the situation. And it's actually quite a serious issue. And it is hard for me because I'm conditioned that way, right? Like cisgender, straight man, and a person who, with some regret played and engaged in physical activity, sports. I played ball, and there was a lot of martial arts training that led into like MMA stuff and ongoing, and there's a lot of very heavy energy in those spaces. That is very like, like, what's up, bro? You mad? You want to settle this? And yet that energy exists in those spaces with women as well, and even fighters that I have, kind of trained with, sparred with. And I just even thought, because I think the most significant thing, it wasn't me, but it just so happened in high school. I remember one of the high schools, at the high school, I was on the wrestling team, and I wrestled at a weight class that at that time was a weight class that was likely not going to be too common for a young, developing, like adolescent woman, like a high school age woman wasn't going to be wrestling at what, like 170, 175. And that, folks, I'm saying that because I know there are going to be people who are saying, oh, what are you saying? Women can't be 170 pounds. Like, no, just remember, this is young, developing bodies, young women. And it, so generally it was a friend of mine. I was wrestling at 170. There was a friend of mine who was wrestling at like 125. And he was facing a young woman from this other high school team. And there was a lot of, I remember, this was back in the like late 80s, right? Early 90s, right? So it was a big deal that this and it was so difficult for him. And he was a good friend of mine. And I said, look, man, don't go into that in some way where you feel some kind of way where you feel either pressured to like tear up the mat with this opponent because she's female, or that there's a lot of pressure on you. And there were people looking at him saying, come on, man, what do you like, how fast, how is it gonna, and like how quick are you gonna pin her, pinning being the thing that you do in wrestling to win, or whatever the case is. And the thing was, it was a full, all the periods, right, full match, beautiful, like, and my friend was a real technician, right, in the sense of, and this young opponent that he had, she was a technician. It was like watching two chess masters go at it, because she was strong. He had some advantages, in terms of just his development. He was a ripped little guy, and I say little guy, being somewhat, he was probably like 5'7", 125, and he was, he had some strength. But you couldn't really tell. You couldn't tell that he wasn't, as it's a terrible like term for it, but like, yeah, man, it's not like you ragdolled her, like, it's like, it's terrible. Like it's awful.
My association may be different.
Yeah, but the fact was that it was a beautiful match, and we learned something that day that I think we were very fortunate to learn at that point, because many other friends of ours didn't have that same kind of awareness that they walked out of that particular case with. And he won, but the thing was, he won by outpointing her. You know, like he
Yeah.
escaped enough times, he gained control enough times, he did whatever, and it wasn't because of anything other than just he was real good.
Yeah.
She was real good. But then when he won, the fact that he won was immediately assessed to the fact that he's male. And then on the bus ride home, because we went to the school, and so it was away, right? And we were bus riding back home. And on the bus ride back home, everyone was like, way to have it take that long, man. It's the only time I'm gonna say, should I say, can I say crass jokes at this point? It's the only time that it was there was a complaint that a man lasted for a long time with a woman. It was complained about at that point, and it's like he went the full distance, you know. And that's gonna receive such, it's like it's terrible. It's a terrible joke, terrible things.
It's too late.
Too late, right? There. And go in the comments, right? Like, you know, that's please. What I listen to being said on YouTube these days is it's a, oh my gosh, I'm sounding like an old guy these days. Hello everyone. Yes, back in the 80s and 90s when I went to high school, yes folks, I am in my late 40s. So so that was just a little example of how, you know, there may have been some kind of awareness and acceptance of a increasingly equitable circumstance, like within the wrestling, because when it was like whistle, go, there was no, I mean, they're exactly the same weight. She was ripped, you can tell. I mean, she was like cut and every, you know, there was no like, you know, this is not someone who was, I mean, it's not like, folks, I don't know. I mean, I think there's a lot of people now, because there's a lot of women wrestling. And of course, there's a lot of women wrestling. You know why? Because the most popular thing in terms of pursuing a path like that is into mixed martial arts. And I'm one of these people. I don't know how people, there's strikers and there's grapplers and there's everything, folks. I'm not a big MMA guy. I mean, it's something that I learned. It's something that I did for a little bit of time. But from the early days, I can say, before everybody knew how to wrestle, it was definitely an advantage to know how to wrestle, because wrestling was your base. Like, people were like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm taking you down and putting you on your back and then coming down with, like, you know, like ground and pound and things like that. But the idea was, no, in wrestling, there's no ground and pound. There's nothing like that. She was good. She could double leg takedown. She threw him down. She ragdolled my friend, right? And you know, and it was something to watch. But as you were saying, Nadine, you know, there is that sense of overcorrection, but it's so difficult, right? Because when it comes to race, when it comes to gender, when it comes to being disenfranchised, there is a very real, especially when we're doing the other thing, when we're doing the prison slavery thing, right? The other time, and people are like, well, it's, you know, it's within the you know, initial writings of what we developed with the prison system, that it's just a way to prolong slavery. And it's like, well, god damn, man, like you're just doing it so like in the open. And yeah, and so there is also a sense of, no, fuck that. Let there be overcorrection. Let men, cisgendered, heterosexual, white men who are of high socioeconomic status, let's drag bitches for a while, you know, like fuck those guys, because they're still there. They're still talking about, like, hey, you don't get to choose to terminate your pregnancy because we said so, because Jesus said so. And that's still happening in 2022, man. You know when they did that first? They made that they decided that in 72. That's when I was born. And they're still, now it's like, you know, they're changing that 50 years later. It's like, so anyway,
I guess who, it's funny because what like context matters, like as far as like who was, you know, who was being discussed. And yes, it was men, but like I got the sense from the person that I was watching, and I'm so sorry I don't remember the name. I will maybe like, I don't know, but like anyways, I got a sense from the person that was discussing it and from the way that she was discussing it that this is not, it wasn't like some well-to-do, like, and I'm not just putting, you know, I'm not just trying to like, well, I guess I am kind of disqualifying people from from this lens, but like it wasn't just someone that was like talking about like she didn't seem like she just came from, you know, I don't know for sure, but like she just came from a place of, you know, like complete privilege of just like, well, I, you know, have not like she or the people that she would deal with wasn't like, it wasn't like she was talking about, you know, people that are just like, you know, I have all the privilege, the money, the like power, I have like the world is my oyster type thing. It was a group of like that I'm guessing is like in or around, you know, my economical like status. Like, I don't know, but basically, like, especially because of the issues that she was talking about, you know, like even like domestic violence, like leading to jail, like prison or jail. And it wasn't just people like men who were being abused, but also, you know, men who were abusers, you know, and like linking that back into like their childhood, how they grew up and, you know, and, you know, like whether grew up in poverty. So it wasn't just like, this is an excuse to like get away with murder, but it was more of like, this is a societal problem because of like imposing that this is what it means to be a man, be like this, reject this, and like go against, you know what I mean? Like screw who you are as a person, fill in these boxes, check all of these boxes type thing. And that is harming women and men alike. But like, it's not like an excuse, like, well, you can just, you know, abuse whoever and like get away with it. It's like, let's take a holistic approach to this type thing. Not like, let's give people an excuse.
So
murder, yeah.
That's where it gets a little bit complicated, right? Because
yes.
there are different branches of men's rights advocacy that may exist, right? There's the idea that there are real issues concerning violence against men that are not being taken seriously. There are real issues of how men are given the space to kind of exist in whatever way they may seem, especially with all of these different spaces in which we can increasingly choose to be acknowledged in terms of how we perceived ourselves relative to gender identity, relative to you know, just how we exist on an intrapersonal level and how we want others to recognize that and be that way with us. Like, you know, there is, you know, my son, he's coming up, he's 12 years old, and there is a great sense of not even trying to codify anything for him to say, well, these are all the ways that, you know, these are, you know, the pronouns that you can choose to use, these are the pads that you can. It's not for me to tell him. He refers to himself as he, him, right? And he hasn't chosen anything different relative to that, but he's well aware of it in the sense that it has existed in his awareness all the way from elementary school, right? Not only in terms of what he's been learning, but in terms of friends that he's had who have identified and chosen to identify in different ways. But that complex question of what does it mean to be a man? Oh my goodness. What? I don't even know. You know, I believe I am a man, but there are, even at my age, coming through my career trajectory and my socioeconomic status at present, I am like, it's like I'm not a like man who's taking it to the to the hoop and just making sure that I'm super awesome and I'm a provider and I'm a lion. I'm like I'm not like I am likely in any like in relationships I've been in. I mean, in the past, I suppose I probably only because I am a man, even though I'm a man of color, but I am a man, I earned more than women partners I was in relationships with. And it was probably just because that was unfair, right? But in general, if I, come together and likely, I'm saying in my own sphere of, kind of where people come to professionally in that particular place, I'm always going to be the one who like earns less, and that is a weakness. That's like you're not a real man. You're not doing that just because I've chosen that particular criteria of my manhood, high earnings and being like a player, in that way, like a gamer. That's not necessarily important to me, and that goes into many other complex issues. But then there's also aspects of men's rights advocacy that are about the exact opposite. It's advocating for men take charge, men are the leaders, men earn the most, men are powerful, men are strong, don't be a pussy. Like, it's all of those things are some men's rights groups are arguing for, saying that I mean, you've heard the word alpha male, right? Alpha man. That's not like a real thing. There's some dispute relative to science because I think the original idea was because packs of canines like wolves are supposed, like, there's the alpha, or there's like in like a space of large apes, primates, there's like the silverback gorilla, right? But some of those things were taken out of the context of how the complex social network actually works. Like, the people who were like really in charge of that, and folks, I'm not well versed in this kind of thing, and you may know, Nadine, like what those things are, like the pod of apes, what are the group, the family, right? Just call it a family. And all the animals is just families, right?
I think
so a family of apes, like the female apes were very much like decision makers, and they took charge, and they were like, this is how we're doing, this is for the and so it wasn't so like, I am the silverback, bitches form in line. It's like, it's not, it doesn't happen, like, it's not real. But humans made that, like, I'm an alpha, like, into something.
Yeah. Plus, can I just say that, have you ever really seen those silverbacks, like the old, like their faces, or they're like, you see scars, deep wounds, like they have bled for that, for not even just for that position, like they bled for the family, for, the group. And that's kind of how that, what I mean? Like, it's a real thing, not just like a picture of like, I'm the protector, and like, but like in day-to-day thing, is like, is that what's really happening?
Right. I mean, in the sense
that what's really needed.
In human spaces, men are just claiming alpha-dom, like, as it's a thing, but they're not really like, well, one can say that in the way that we say in social justice spaces, they're not using their privilege for anything. They're just using their privilege. I mean, saying men, like, I'm an alpha male,
right?
And that's not really like, I use that status to help my community and my family. Right. No, I use that like, come on. I use that to get laid, and like, that's like that. And that's an unfortunate thing, but unfortunate thing to have to say, but nevertheless, 2022, folks, we're actually in the 20 something range of time. We're not in the 19 something, which is what I came up in as a young man. And I thought we would get to 2022 and things would be, everyone's complaining about wokeness, man. I thought things would be like futuristic. Like, I thought this was going to be like Blade Runner shit, and we're not. We're like in the 1950s again, with how many white men are still spouting shit, right? So let's just take a look at this, because this is a Mother Jones, an old article from 2015, but it's like a seminal, it's talking about the seminal development of the men's rights movement. And it's this guy right here, right? He looks like a guy, I don't know what he looks like. I mean, he's a white guy, but he doesn't look like what the men's rights activists look like now necessarily.
Yeah.
But let's see what he was about, right? Like, this is I want to go to where they're talking about it. His name's Warren Farrell. So Farrell is widely considered to be the father of the men's rights movement. Published a series of books in the 80s, right? He said men, gender-based discrimination of men, because it occurs because men are casualties of a society that relies on their sacrifices while ignoring their suffering. So, talking about sacrifices is not, to me, it feels cringy, because I don't know, Nadine.
I mean,
there's a lot of men that have sacrificed in your time, and I don't know how. I mean, you've just received the privilege of that sacrifice. You haven't really made sacrifices yourself, have you? I don't know.
Was he talking to me? God, I was trying to
Yeah, no, he's talking about men who are sacrificing, but not being acknowledged for all the suffering that they've experienced.
Yeah, that feels weird, honestly. It's gives
right?
you that little flippy feeling at the pit of your stomach.
It's a little cringy, right? But he says he blames this phenomenon for a litany of woes, from the plight of blue-collar workers. This is also older, right? So this is in the 80s. So there may have been a more, I don't have the numbers, I don't have the data here in front of me, but I think there was a perception that men were the workers and women were beginning to emerge as part of the labor force, right? But they were certainly marginalized, and they were still how you doing, Doreen? Smack the ass. That still happened. That wasn't Mad Men, folks, in the 1960s. That was in the 80s in offices. Women were that's why sexual harassment is such a thing now, because of that shit. And it's not just the smacking was just the fact that men were in such positions of power that it was just understood. It's not like women liked that in the 80s. Women hated that. But they were just God damn it. And Doreen, her friend Martha is Doreen, you have to do this, and it's for the kids, and you guys need that second income because, Gerald is disabled and he's not going to be, or he's on disability, I should say. And so people didn't understand that Doreen was at that point the sole earner. Gerald probably resented Doreen for it, probably beat the shit out of her for it. The kids didn't respect that she was doing that, because they were still where's dinner, Mom? Where's this? She's oh, okay. All right, time to get to the thing. Time to make your lunches for tomorrow. Time to make sure the laundry's clean. So doing all these traditional housework things on top of being an unacknowledged sole earner, and then getting her ass spanked at work. But or having the guy come and lean down next to you, rub your shoulders a little bit, lean down, rub your shoulder, and say, you go ahead and get these reports to me by 3. Okay, babe. Those, or hun, okay, sugar, Yeah. So I'm not so sure. I'm not convinced in terms of what he's talking about right now. But so
I'm not so convinced because now I've already seen his picture and I'm
no, do not judge a book by its cover. Come on now. There's no history of evidence that white men present problems. Right. So for some, the manosphere, as this used to be called that. I don't think it's called that right now. Maybe it still is. For some, the manosphere offers a place. So this is where men come. This is where men come to remember we were doing that for a while. We were doing that women's peer development group.
Yeah.
So it was like,
Yeah.
peer space, and
Yeah.
women came into that space, and, Nadine and a colleague of hers led this, folks, as a, you see it on her screen there, a peer development specialist.
Peer development.
And, it was very like for women by women. So why did they let me in? I don't know. I mean, I guess they did. I was there as a resource, but it was very much about not just a socio-emotional empowerment, for women, but it was a space of like, okay, now let's do this. And I was there first saying that it's not only my privilege as an educated person, but it's my privilege as a man, and it's my privilege. Those were my privileges that I was operating out of, to share that privilege and power. But it was also, in another sense of the word, my privilege to be there, because I love this, man. I love that, there were women talking about housing issues here in Gainesville, Florida. There were women talking about domestic violence issues. There were women talking about it. This was a particular woman who spoke about the death of her 13-year-old son by I won't say just the police, because here in Florida where we live, folks, we have, there's the Gainesville Police Department and the Alachua County Sheriff's Office. And I'm not going to say, because I don't know who was responsible, which particular space, but that was a thing. There was that was like, folks, just 2 hours down from where we are was, back in the day, remember Trayvon, right? Like that happened, and it was a huge thing. And then who was the Trayvon Martin, and then it was Tamir Rice, was that his name, right? Tamar or Tamir, it was one of those, right?
I don't know. So
yeah, but the idea, I'll just look that up. I think that's, so it's like, I think Tamir, yeah, I think that's gonna be it. Oh God, look, oh my God, look at Tamir, man. Oh, he was 12. Oh no. Oh my gosh, that's Miles. Oh my goodness.
That's Phoenix.
Yeah. So our friend's son was just this. Women who were sick of nothing being done. So those were the kind of things. It wasn't like women's rights, it was women who were sick of nothing being done, and these were issues that they were facing as women. So that was beautiful. But men need that too, Nadine. They need a place, right? They need a group, they need some peer development. So there, for them, it's the manosphere, and it offers a place to air real grievances about issues such as bias in family courts or sexual abuse suffered by men. But it also has spawned a network of activists and sites that take Farrell's ideology, this Warren Farrell who wrote all this stuff, in a disturbing direction. Men's rights forums on sites like 4chan and Reddit are awash in misogyny and anti-feminist vitriol. Participants argue that false allegations of rape and domestic abuse are rampant, or that shelters for battered women are a financial scam. Others rail against women for being independent or sexually promiscuous. Ms. Pueros, go. Shelters for battered women are a financial scam. How's that feeling for you?
Well, I have needed them many times in my life, unfortunately, but like, fortunately, it was there. Like, oh my God, this is so sick, because I can't tell you how much I've needed that. Like the choice to like go,
to have
sometimes I was gonna say, sometimes it boils down to whether or not you have somewhere to go, like where your kids will be. It's not even just somewhere to go, like, can I feed my kids? Can I get them to school? can I had to leave with a backpack, or like I don't even have my left shoe, like, but here's my kid. Yes, like, but like, so no, it's not a scam at all. It is a desperate need, absolutely. And some, believe it or not, some depending on like what city you're in, or like some battered, or I don't know, I don't even want to say it. It's not called that. It's called domestic violence shelter.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah, they used to be called, the terrible name was battered women's shelters.
Like nobody wants
And that's
to be called that.
was factually correct. That was like, like whatever in terms of vocabulary, definitionally correct. Battered was indeed what women were, and their kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a little bit
that's
weird.
Disgusting. And you know what I would just say, like, I feel like the people that use this space for that are taking away from completely like any validity that, like, that is there, like, as far as like, yeah, there is actually a need for like a space for men to gather, and like, just, I feel like it's a human need first and foremost. And there, like I was saying, there are issues to be addressed, like, for like men's issues, because we do suppress a lot and just like tell people to like, well, suck it up, and like raise them from small children up to adults like in this way, and then like be like, oh my gosh, what is wrong with you? You know what I'm saying? So like, and that's concern for me as a mother of sons, as well as daughters, but to use that space in that way, just to rant and rave and use your privilege to like, spout disgusting things that are like that. Can we even say like, it's 2022? Can we please like leave that? Why? You have every other space. I bet, I'm so sorry, but I'm going to say, I bet the people that are using it for that type of, propaganda, I'm sorry, you have privilege enough, I feel, to use every other space to like spout that, if that's what you believe. But like, why poison that space? I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, speaking to that, because this is the kind of vitriol. Let's just like get into it in terms of how you're referring to it. It's like it's hard stuff, right? Yeah. A voice for men's founder. So like, this is what the group, one of the national groups is called. There's also the National Coalition for Men, but a voice for men's founder, Paul Elam, who is a friend and protege of our original person in this, Farrell, the guy whose picture we saw, has justified violence against women and written that some of them walk through life with the equivalent of "I'm a stupid, conniving bitch, please rape me" neon sign glowing above their empty little narcissistic heads. Other activists have published names of women they consider enemies and have praised online stalkers such as the Gamergate, this we'll get into in another way, mobs who bombard feminist critics with rape and death threats. So
basically, this is exactly where those people are supposed to come and like vent all of this stuff. That's what this was for.
Yeah, and to reaffirm and kind of reinforce
what a waste
beliefs.
Of like human existence.
Yeah, because that isn't covering the issue of what it means to be a man or male men who are victims of violence, sexual violence, domestic violence, or even workplace violence and workplace toxicity, right? Yeah,
the people who are saying these things on here sound like people who would be the arbitrators of that. Like, it sounds like you're the person that's creating this type of environment for men and women alike. Like, I don't, like, what is going on here? It's definitely not a space to like come together and voice your being abused, like with this abusive ass language.
Yeah.
I'm a stupid, conniving bitch.
Yeah.
Please rape me.
So check this out. This is amazing, right? This is what he said next. Farrell told me that these tactics, like Paul Elam's tactics, make him uncomfortable, but he argues that all movements, this is a movement, remember, have and need their extreme factions. I've been through the movements, he said. I've seen how MLK alone was dismissed. It took Stokely Carmichael, Eldridge Cleaver, you know, Black Panthers, we can put Malcolm in there, right, to say things that were pretty ridiculous in some ways, but that brought attention, the attention that led to Martin Luther King being seen as the nice, centered, balanced person. So he's basically saying he's Martin Luther King, and Paul Elam and other guys are Stokely Carmichael and Eldridge and Malcolm. They're those people, and that's the comparison he's making, which is such a remarkably, like, it's such a warped idea of even the complex value that Stokely Carmichael, Eldridge Cleaver, and Malcolm X provided relative to their constructs, frameworks, speeches, writings, whatever the case was, right? It wasn't that they were the badasses who were like, fuck white people, and Martin was like, now, let's not fuck white people, let's just hold them accountable, you know? And it's like, he's saying that's what these people are doing. There's like, fuck the conniving bitches, let's beat the shit out of them. He's like, now, let's not beat the shit out of conniving bitches. Let's just, you know, like, make it difficult
do it in private.
To like exist and have any kind of social mobility. So as hasn't been done for years upon years. So let's go check something out, right? I think it's time to kind of get into some aspects of how these particular things have emerged into present day, and we have some choices of what we can take a look at. But I mean, there's Cassie J, who has done the whole like red pill documentary. Let's just listen to Cassie J. Let's see what she has to say.
Okay.
In 2013, I decided to meet my enemies. I was a 27-year-old award-winning documentary filmmaker and a proud feminist, and I was determined to expose the dark underbelly of the men's rights movement. At that point, all I knew of the men's rights movement was from what I read online, that it's a misogynistic hate group actively working against women's equality. While the vast majority of my previous work was about women's issues, I directed documentaries about reproductive rights, single motherhood, and the need for more girls to get into STEM education. So when I learned that no one had ever documented the men's rights movement in a film before, I saw it as an opportunity to continue fighting for women's equality by exposing those preventing it. So for 1 year, I traveled North America, meeting the leaders and followers of the men's rights movement. I spent anywhere from 2 hours up to 8 hours interviewing each individual men's rights activist, also known as MRA. And I filmed 44 people total. And there's an important rule in documentary filmmaking. As an interviewer, you do not interrupt. So I'm asking questions, and I'm getting their full life story. And in the moment, I didn't realize it. But now looking back, I can see that while I was conducting my interviews, I wasn't actually listening. I was hearing them speak, and I knew the cameras were recording, but in those moments of sitting across from my enemy, I wasn't listening.
So she is the person who did, let's just take a look at this. Whoop. Okay, so So you know the red pill, blue pill thing relative
Mhm.
to like the Matrix, right?
Yeah.
Everything's been the Matrix now. So it's
Yeah.
like the blue pill is this is just how things are, and the red pill is like now I have seen. Like it's like Saul's experience on the road to Damascus. Like
Yeah.
the scales have fallen from my eyes, right? So it's a cool metaphor, but you know, like it's also you know, like I'm not sure it's so I'm not sure it's really apropos to how it's been taken up by you know, red pill you know, people. So let's take a look. Hang on, sorry. I want to take a look at this one. Let's see what this has to say. This is the red pill documentary, and you know, it's I want to see if we can open this up to open image, new tab. That's super. No, these things load up in different ways at different times, but you know, like the resolution is, you know, as an image, it'll be a resolution. But let me see if we can take it to that particular page and see if it's bigger. So it's her page. So let's just see what the Red Pill documentary is. Now available, the other half in honor of International Men's Day, November 19th. Documentary film The Red Pill would like to illustrate some of the issues that uniquely or disproportionately affect men in the US. Workplace deaths is 93% men, right?
I was just watching that, yeah.
Men die by suicide more often than women. 73% suicides are men. Okay, but this is better. Lovely. Now we can do it. Okay. 1 in 6 men have been sexually abused or assaulted, and 1 in 4 men in the US have experienced rape, physical violence, and or stalking by an intimate partner in their lifetime. So I think that's not saying like it's more than those statistics for women. It's just that men too have these issues, you know. Yet there are only 2 shelters in the US specifically for male victims of domestic abuse. Of the 2,000 plus shelters that serve women, most turn away men, and in some cases turn away boys as young as 12.
What?
Yeah, because, you know, then there's a
crazy,
very real idea of it's not a safe space for women and their children, for adolescent men to be in that shelter.
Oh, by themselves without a parent?
Yeah, but like, you know, just single men, single boys, you know, you just by themselves. Yeah.
Yeah,
so,
I see. Yeah, right.
Yeah. Men receive 63% more prison time compared to women convicted of the same crime. Yes. But you know what it is? The guy who's like, yeah, she's just a conniving bitch who's walking around with "rape me" on her forehead because she's such a twat. Like those guys are not these guys. They're not. It's not the same population we're talking about.
Yeah,
like
that's exactly what I was saying earlier. Yeah.
You know, so this is. I mean, you know, this is what like she has. Yeah, 99.9% of military deaths are male. But it's because women have traditionally been they've been suppressed in military spaces, workspaces, you know, like traditionally been, you know, because this is also in terms of what timeline is some of this data emergent, right? Because it may not have been as emergent at times where it's very clear that women are disenfranchised, marginalized, and disaffected in multiple ways, and therefore there was a reason why 2,000 plus women's domestic violence shelters emerged. There's a reason for that, right? There was also a reason for why the majority of, you know, AANA spaces for a very long time were filled with men. You know, there might be some correlation there. You know, that's not it's not a direct connection, but you know, if there's a lot of dudes who are combating deep addiction and are there, and you know, they've they're there because they've come to a place where along that way to lead them to where they're getting their sobriety chips, they have beaten the ass of a lot of people. Because the funny thing is, AA groups were filled, and I've worked with groups even in recent times, are predominantly filled with men. Not as much anymore. There's lots of addiction groups relative to women and men, and those are separated out at times as well for the past, decade or so, maybe a little bit more than a decade, 10, 15 years. But prior to that, why is it that so many groups, AA groups, were filled with the majority of men, and Al-Anon, the people who have been victimized by those individuals, groups, were primarily filled with women? Why would that be the case? Right? So this is kind of like, it's weird. It's just like one-sided. You know what's nice though? When you make an infographic, it gets the job done. You just like, it's so believable. Oh my God, this is such great data. Let's not question it at all. Right? Like, so anyway, we got her. Let's see what she gets into saying, though, like a little bit later. Let me just...
He loses his college scholarship and is branded with the inescapable title of rapist.
Okay.
I would hear...
So let's say, I'm not going to rewind that, but let's say, because we'll see what, in context, what she comes with, but let's say this is an individual who was accused of rape in college, and, those are the outcomes of that accusation. Right? So, because this is a big, like the date rape idea, rape by someone that and have a more complex, even sexual relationship, even at times, like you've had consensual sexual relationship, you've consented to sex 99 times. You don't get to rape the person non-consensually, have sex with them the 100th time, right? Like that doesn't, shift things. So
for them say, a woman being raped isn't a big deal. It's as if I didn't hear the word falsely accused of rape. All I heard was he was accused of rape. Of course, rape is a big deal, and all the men's rights activists I met agreed it is a horrible thing to have happened to anyone. I eventually realized what they're saying is they're trying to add to the gender equality discussion who is standing up for the good-hearted, honorable man that loses his scholarship, his job, or worse yet, his children, because he's accused of something he absolutely did not do? Well, I couldn't keep denying the points they were making. There are real issues. But in my effort to avoid agreeing with my enemy completely, I changed from putting words in their mouth to acknowledging the issue, but insisting they are women's issues. So here are two examples of how that would go. A men's rights activist would say to me, men are far more likely to lose their child in a custody battle. And I would counter, well, because women are unfairly expected to be the caretaker, it's discrimination against women that women get custody more often. Yeah. I'm not proud of that. Second example.
There's a lot of discomfort in that crowd.
An MRA would say to me, men are roughly 78% of all suicides throughout the world. And I would counter with, but women attempt suicide more often. So It's not a contest, but I kept making it into one. Why couldn't I simply learn about men's issues and have compassion for male victims without jumping at the opportunity to insist that women are the real victims? Well, after years...
So let's think about that a little bit, because she is fairly or unfairly also marked as the progenitor of a lot of kind of a base of content for the men's rights movement going forward, from back in like 2013, 2014, when this film first came out, or the documentary first came out. and it really brought the idea forward in terms of that, you know, I've been red pilled, man. I can see things for what they are now. You know, but she is also coming from this platform of saying, well, I needed to look at things from a more open-minded space, or I needed to really be able to hear what the other side of this argument may be. And, you know, there's a lot of correlations between why she may have been hesitant to listen to the other side of the argument, because there are people who may argue against, like, through the whole critical race theory aspect of, you know, what we covered some time ago, the idea that people want to argue against the willing participation in education around the racism that undergirds every aspect of the development of this nation, of the United States, right? And they're like, there's no space for hearing the other side, because that's giving like credence or some, you know, validity to that statement that racism isn't an issue in this country. And it's the same idea when it comes to the idea of, you know, Nazi Germany, the Jewish Holocaust, the idea that anybody who, I mean, it's become so, like, you know, Holocaust denial has been and become a thing that is so horribly anti-Semitic, in the sense that it's couched in so much anti-Semitism. Even why someone would, if someone is saying that, it's usually because there's a whole lot of, it's all, you know, the fault of the Jewish race, right? Like it's that kind of thing. And she's making an argument that we have to listen to the other side, right? So, Nadine, what do you think? Where do you fall in that particular space in terms of being impacted, let's say being impacted by a lot of misogyny, a lot of violence against women, you know, that occurred in your life, and you've been, you know, very much disconnected relative to racism, you know, or not disconnected, but you've been disenfranchised and disaffected relative to racism in and around your life. But I think we lost you for a little bit, so we're just going to keep moving and going, and we'll come back to Nadine about that particular question, because that's important, how we can come to her. So let's keep seeing what Cassie J is having to say here.
Of researching and fact-checking what the men's rights activists were telling me, there is no denying that there are many human rights issues that uniquely or disproportionately affect men. Paternity fraud uniquely affects men. The United States Selective Service, in the case of a draft, still uniquely affects men. Workplace deaths, disproportionately men. War deaths, overwhelmingly men. Suicide, overwhelmingly men. Sentencing disparity, life expectancy, child custody, child support, false rape allegations, criminal court bias, misandry, failure to launch, boys falling behind in education, homelessness, veterans issues, infant male genital mutilation, lack of parental choice once a child is conceived, lack of resources for male victims of domestic violence. So many issues that are heartbreaking if you are the victim or you love someone who is the victim of any one of these issues.
So there was one part of that that really popped out to me in terms of everything that she was listing. And, you know, this is the idea that there are multiple problems that occur. And from my vantage point, that's the idea of the problems that occur relative to young boys, adolescent boys, young men, educationally, right? there are a lot of factors there. The factors are socioeconomic, the factors are race and ethnicity based. But there's also this idea that there are certain expectations that are placed on boys still, and there are certain disadvantages that are sort of hidden disadvantages relative to boys, not in the space of the idea that they are gain the greatest privilege within STEM education spaces and then qualify to fulfill STEM-based jobs and careers moving forward in life. Yes, that occurs. Yes, young girls moving into STEM education and then women moving into not only moving into STEM fields, but being leaders in STEM spaces. That is something that continues to be a very big issue. And it's like, you know, turning an oil tanker. That takes a long time to change, especially in institutional culture, in spaces, you know, in organizations. And I mean, we can look at this another time, but go into the idea of how women are still marginalized in technology, professional spaces. But the issue with boys is a very delicate issue in the sense that it is important to look at boys. Boys are becoming disenfranchised, disaffected, and even disenchanted relative to what their prospects in life are, because there is a very set understanding of what boys are meant to do and how they're meant to traverse that space, that developmental space, moving through education and then higher education and then to their professional space and down the road, you know, for the rest of their lives, even where they're supposed to end up 60 years from then, from when they first get started. And those issues need to be discussed. As I was talking about myself, how I came up, how I'm choosing to partner with my son's mother and many different his two grandmothers, even though his two grandfathers have, unfortunately, my father and my son's mother's father, they both died too soon, you know, horribly, both based to you know, relative to cancer. And that was not for nothing either. Their health and their trajectory in life and where they came to in terms of early deaths and early, for those of us, you know, who are in the latter part of our journey, you know, early, if you die in your late 60s or early 70s, you know, that's not awesome. There's still a lot to be done, and there's still a lot that should be able to be done rather than just retiring to Boca, right? So it was unfortunate, and my son could have used his grandfather's, but he is receiving so much from his grandmother's, right? And that's very important because he's receiving, and from me being very actionable and focused in on this aspect of raising him, presenting even myself by example, not preaching to him, but presenting myself as someone who takes a path less traveled in terms of traditional manhood or masculinity or the male perspective and, you know, forming a trajectory through life. And so that's giving him some options, I hope, in that regard. So that's an important place to come into. So as much as the disproportionate incarceration of men, but especially men of color. So let's not also forget intersectionality here. But I hesitate when I hear Miss J speaking in the way that she's speaking, because she's almost presenting this in a way that it's important for us to look at these issues in terms of men's rights, because we've sort of been looking at these issues of women's rights and paying a little bit too much attention over here. And that is a message that men's rights activists have run with right? They have been running with this message to just kind of move forward in a way that is, how should I say it? Like move forward in a way that is so kind of definitive when it comes to the idea that, yes, we are in a place where, whoops, there we are. Okay, we're back. We're in a place where, it's our turn now. It's men who not only we have to focus on men's rights, but we have to make sure that society is focusing on men's rights, and it's time to take back our position because we've been focusing on women's rights too long. But you can't say that at all. That's not a good messaging opportunity, and it's going in very difficult, or it's taking very difficult turns in terms of men's rights activism, because yes, there are very many important things to look at relative to young boys and the issues that they experience, especially young boys of color who grow into young men of color and then are disproportionately incarcerated and are disproportionately represented in spaces of mental health institutions and spaces of addiction and recovery institutions. Yes, we need to look at that, but not because we've been giving women too much attention for too long. That message is very subtly put forth by Cassie J, and men's rights activism has built on that, as though we can't do one without the other. And to a certain extent, there is some truth to that, right? There has to be a stepping aside, but it's hard to say that, right? It's not stepping aside. It's cisgender, white men, socially dominant, hegemonic group of men. It's important for them to share power and privilege actively so that women can define what it means to be wholly a woman in this world. Not like, oh, you did real good, you're doing so good because you're being a woman. It's not that. And it's the same thing as, oh, you're doing so well for a Black person. Or you're doing so, look at this new, one of the President Biden's Supreme Court nominees, right? Is a woman of color, specifically the one I'm thinking of. And the idea there is, all of the criteria has come down around Black and woman, right? In terms of criteria for assessment, and why people are talking about that, and whether it's necessary for a Black woman to be on the Supreme Court, as opposed to what this individual's rulings have been and what her entire kind of vita represents for the good of this country, right? It's a difficult and very subtle kind of thing. But when you originally went off, Nadine, what I was asking, so we're going to circle back around to that.
Yeah,
you guys have been hearing me speak all this time, but the idea was, Cassie J is trying to say at this point that she's trying to be open, right, to the views of male rights activists. But the argument that a lot of people have, and I concur with that, is giving male rights activists space in the way that they are coming forward. I don't want to do that because it's detrimental and damaging to women's rights, just like giving white nationalists space in the great discourse of society is very damaging to civil rights and the rights of marginalized people all across this nation, because the other side, I guess that would be called white rights, the disenfranchised white people, that doesn't need a great and well-developed discourse, because it's bullshit, man. Like that has, like, the rights of white people have been considered disproportionately for a very long time. So the disproportionate non-consideration of white rights for a while is okay. We don't need to cover the white perspective in every single debate that we have, because it's always there, just like men's perspectives are always there. But she's saying we got to give people voice. So how do you feel about that? Like, when you've been, especially in some delicate conversations around being a Black woman working within community justice spaces, and people have been, but the male perspective and the other perspective, especially the perspective of, like it came to when you wrote certain things in one community space, you were doing a lot of writing, remember? Mm-hmm. And some other individuals who happen to be white were editing a lot of your content to say, let's not upset the people in positions of power in this city who are predominantly white.
Yeah, but that's not exactly what was said, though. It was
yeah.
more of a, think of who your audience is, and and that's when I realized that our audiences were different.
Right.
I gotta say, I was really disappointed. I'm really disappointed because I purposely didn't, go too heavy in research, because I wanted to, kind of come with a fresh take. At the same time, I was like, well, I gotta because I have no context, and it's sad that I was taking it more seriously than some of the people that are on here, you know what I mean? Because I'm definitely, this is humanist nightmare fuel, right? So I definitely, am yes, let's, co-create, can we merge these groups? But to know that it's BS and it's just another space, let's infiltrate all the spaces and crush out the, it's almost like if you're watching a movie where we gotta crush the resistance type thing, and it's hello, we're just people over here with real issues, it's a real concern. I was coming at it from a thing of it's a real concern. Me as a Black woman raising a multiracial son, sons, and I am thinking of how to prepare them to come up in the world, and teaching them how to not even how to, but to look at the world that we live in, but there's always the consideration of, that my son is a Black male, there's always that consideration. And well, it's just that that's the type of thinking that I want to do, is about, that's what I just hate, that someone has sullied this, it could be a real thing. You know what I'm saying? It could be a real thing. I mean, it really is, because when it comes down to women's rights and and as I know, as Black women, as a Black mother, we a lot of times come together, or even just, in community around, how to raise our children. So I think it's really something that we've been considering, but this is not even that. I keep talking about stuff that is really going on and really exists, as far as, real just barriers. And my mind, I just don't want to go there. I'm so what? We're talking about this again? I wonder if that's how they feel.
It's important the way that you said it, especially relative to your sons, the just by virtue of the fact that you have sons and daughters.
Yeah.
It is, it's a difficult space to, there's as a conscientious and compassionate parent, you are approaching raising them from a space of equity, but you have to build equity in the sense that you recognize that there isn't equity, even within the space of how, your son may deal with his sister, you know, there's some level of, you know, kind of corrective approach that, I mean, I've seen you make that, you know, especially when your children were a little bit younger. I've seen you make those type of approaches because there are toxic aspects of masculinity and femininity, toxic examples of male and female, that you're addressing both of them to say, no, that's not how we're going to go. You're not going to do that, and you're not going to respond in that way, and you're not going to react to that in this way. You have to think about it from a different lens, a different perspective. So of course those issues have to be addressed from an equitable stance, approaching an equitable stance, because it's your family, it's your children, right? But here the argument kind of ends up becoming this idea in terms of men's rights activism that men have been, I mean, she's saying meeting the enemy, but it seems like men's rights activists have just done that. They flipped the script. They're like, now we are activists and we're fighting the enemy, which is feminists, which is women, you know, and that's a dangerous fire to light. And as we can see, it's become very dangerous. So let's kind of move forward. How about we leave Cassie J for a moment? I wanted to go to this thing because this is India. This is interesting to me, right? So this is inside the growing men's rights movement in India, still a little bit older, but not as old as that. This is from 2018. As you can see, everyone is, because folks, even in India, people wear masks, and there's actually a lot of diligence around COVID. And so this is pre-COVID here. You're seeing all these guys gathered together. Let's see what these folks are saying. All right, let's see, because they may have some valid points, but we also are coming from a country where women, as of maybe 2-3 years ago, were still being stoned, burned with flame, having acid poured on them for being promiscuous or something to that effect. So that's happening, right? So how are we gonna talk about men's rights here? So let's take a listen.
We have to change the society how they think. They think that crime is associated with only men. For this reason we are here. There was no one who talks about men's issues.
In the US, the men's rights.
Why for everything Indian do they have to use like dum 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 dum? Like, why does it have to be a tabla and like that kind of music and a little sitar in the background? You know, Indian people like jazz. They like, you know, like they like K-pop. They like house music. We can put other shit, like, you know. I'm wearing these like Rudra beads, like because they're of significance to me, not just like, you know, like Indian, you know. It's like it's a weird anyway, sorry, that's
I feel you.
Yeah.
This movement is largely contained within online fringe hate groups who maybe meet once a year. But in India, the men's rights activism movement has sort of grown into its own legitimate political platform.
It's no secret that India has a history of laws, traditions, and cultural attitudes that are deeply patriarchal. One area in particular that has been detrimental for women has been the practice of dowry. Dowry is an antiquated tradition where the family of the bride makes payments to the family of the groom. It was technically outlawed in 1961 but continues undeterred to this day. And every year, thousands of women are abused and murdered over dowry disputes.
Again, the woman's family has to pay the man's family just to be like, please, can you take this useless hunk off of our hands? We will pay you, and she'll give you babies and cook some good food and stuff like that. Yeah. Mind you, happily so, but you know, I did not, I mean, I did not marry in traditional Indian ways. I mean, I came to this country when I was younger, and you know, the marriage that I entered into was, in my family's eyes, very non-traditional and problematic, and so on and so forth. So none of these things became an issue, but I know, and it's difficult to say this, but I'll say it very generally, that the culture of my family was very much one, at one point, and my extended family, in Indian families, we talk about extended families, and there were some really deep expectations placed on my wife and my fiance at the time, as we were coming into that space, and the pressure was there. There was a very strong pressure of, you're a woman, and here's a bullet list for you of how you're supposed to deal. And I was very much like the prince in waiting. And so that's there, man. I mean, at a basic level and in a very traditional level in this space as well.
In the 80s, stricter anti-dowry harassment laws appeared in India, and a men's rights movement began to form in reaction to them. And in the last few years, the movement has gained huge momentum following a surge of anti-rape and anti-sexual assault legislation.
In the case of rape, death has been prescribed as a maximum punishment.
Under these new laws, some men are claiming that false accusations from women are making them unfair targets, including Vineet, who has recently been attending men's rights meetups after his wife filed abuse charges and took custody of their daughter. Can you describe the cases that are on you right now?
There are 6 cases.
Yeah.
One is 498A.
Dowry harassment.
Yeah, dowry harassment, you
Okay.
can say. 323.
Which is?
Causing harm. 377. That
Okay.
is unnatural sex. Carries a imprisonment of 10 years.
Okay.
So it's all on her testimony that she says that I had unnatural sex with her.
Okay.
So
That's
Rape?
pretty much referring to, well, no, in that context, it's referencing anal sex.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I was
so-
wondering. I was like, either.
Yeah.
Okay.
can be arrested anytime.
Dang.
The first complaint was put by me. She did not put the first complaint. I made the first complaint to the police.
And what was the complaint you made?
That my daughter was with my parents-in-law, and I wanted to meet my daughter. They refused me.
Okay. So
So
the police
that-
intervened, and the first time it was no trouble for you, and you got your daughter back.
I got my daughter back. But then, as a revenge, you may say, they just got all those cases on me. My wife left me on 23rd of August 2017.
Yeah.
She left with my daughter.
So you have not seen her since. Okay. So before this, were you very?
So awful, to be sure, awful, right? But it's so hard. I have a bias. My bias is we got to be honest in these kind of spaces, right? Like, so my bias as I'm hearing it is like, come on, bro, you did some shit. You did this, like, oh, it's, this terrible thing has happened is there, but it's that awful, like, where there's smoke, there's fire,
Yeah.
kind of thing. And absolutely, there can be a person who can file charges to get away, to take the daughter with her. But again, man, like, why have women ever wanted to run away with their children?
I'm gonna go ahead and say that I have to admit that I also have a bias, because there are things that he said that just like sends red flags shooting up, he went to go get his daughter from, like, his daughter was at the parents' house, the in-laws' house, visiting, and he went to go see her and got the police to give him back. It sounds like she was trying to get her kids away already, and then, you know what I mean? So I don't know, like, I will just say that that's my bias, but like,
yeah, we don't know what the actual situation is, but
it's difficult when you lump it all together, because it could very well be like he's saying exactly what's happening, but there's so many cases that's like, you know what I mean? Like,
but you also can't
opposite,
ignore historical context, right? In very common vernacular, I mean, I've grown up around this, I have seen it. I have grown up around friends who dealt with this. It's Indian husbands are known, Like, why would there be such a diversity of people, individuals? Every individual is different religions, different ethnicities in India, you know, like different people from different places. But in general, like there's this, well, Indian husbands, they beat the shit out of their wives and their kids. And then the women suffer because divorce wasn't a thing, and now it's a thing, and then people try to run away. Remember, this is in India. So you can't also say like, oh, maybe she could do, because women here can't do shit. Women keep getting their asses beat, and their kids get their asses beat. And there are still in 2022 such issues around domestic violence. So you can't just be like, oh, we have to give the benefit of the doubt. Why would this woman want to run away? Because if she, I mean, okay, I'm going to be totally, it's still my bias. My bias. But I would suspect that, I mean, two things could happen. Either if she was seen as adulterous and she was running away to be with another man, this guy and his entire community would feel justified in going and killing him. Maybe not, I mean, I'm being very melodramatic about it, but maybe that wouldn't be the case. But this guy would be empowered by that. There is the possibility that he could feel cucked by it. Like he's like, oh, she ran away with another guy and I don't want people to know about that. But that's not how things happen in India culturally and traditionally. There is, if she initiates that, that's seen as like a moral flaw. Like you fucked up, and we're gonna, like, there'd be no problem with him taking, she'd be cast away, take the kid, everything's fine, you're the hero. Right? But because that's not being discussed, I don't know, man. I don't know. Let's just see. Let's give him a little bit more.
Gung-ho about men's rights in general?
No, I protested for women. I myself has protested for rights of women.
So you would consider yourself to be a feminist? Because
I was a feminist until I knew that even the men can have problems.
I wasn't sure if Vineet was guilty or not. But it's true that since these gender equality laws have been put into place, there have been a handful of false accusations. And it's these specific false cases that have galvanized the men's rights movement. They craft a narrative that says the system is being rigged against them in the name of female empowerment. And looking to men's rights organizations around the world, it's pretty clear the formula to start a movement. Find men who might very well be falsely accused, draw them together under this banner of brotherhood, then convince them that they're victims because feminism has gone too far and that men are second-class citizens. The biggest...
Damn. Think of that, man. Because how many men feel like that? How many men feel victimized? I mean, look, and it's a difficult thing to talk about, so you have to talk about it, Nadine, as you feel comfortable. But, you know, in a circumstance that you found yourself, you know, the father of your, like, you know, youngest children, you know, in that case, there was a kind of recurrence of the idea that that individual would explode, decimate everything, violence, putting you in the hospital, like terrifying stuff, all this kind of things. And then within that person's family, with whom you keep connection because those children are from, you know, that lineage as well, and you're trying to be a good parent and even trying to focus in on some potential for co-parenting down the road. But the idea being that there was always a recurrence of like, how could you do this to me, Nadine? You've been beaten down, and I've been, how did that happen? How did that, like, where does that, just from your singular perspective of that individual, we can't generalize that to men in general, but men seem to have that recurrent, like, but you did this to me. Like, where does that come from when lɁiterally I'm not even going to say that. Can't get like that. You know, it's re-traumatizing to like, but to enter into that kind of a space. But somehow in his mind he equated some form of weird, complicated, perhaps emotional abuse that you may have perpetrated, but the horrible, like hospitalization inducing violence was on his part. Like, but somehow there's like a balancing act. Like, so but where does that logic come from? The logic of victim. I'm a victim for men.
Well, I will say in this, way to hit me with a big one and then ask me to talk, but like, but I will say in this case,
because we go deep, man. We go deep in these spaces.
Got to. I'll say it was like it was always when we would talk, it would be like because of past things that happened, you know, in this individual's past, like because of past trauma, you know, it would go sometimes between that and then also anything that I did to remind him of that trauma, you know, was like, in his head, he could see how like, that's the connection. Like, see, don't you see? And like, I'm so sorry. I don't mean to laugh. I did see, but I was seeing from a completely different like perspective. Like, yeah, that sucks. You know what also sucks?
So there was there
was like, and it was also, and it wasn't, there was that, but there was also constantly being like, I'll just say at the end of the day, honestly, his behavior was constantly excused, which like made it validated. And this is in, you know, because not in society, right? Like, you know, he went away and ta-da, it fixed him. Oh wait, no, that didn't happen. But like just, you know, like we have this thing, like families, you know, in the most well-meaning way sometimes can just not know what to do with things or not have the tools to handle it, but like, all right, we're just gonna like put that to the side but it didn't go anywhere. You know what I mean? It was just never addressed. So that allowance kind of like was just like, this is how things have been. It's normal for me to flip out, take it out on whoever and everything that is within my path, and then blame that back on that same person.
Right. You know, and I would suspect that that happens across social, cultural, racial demographics. You know, that there is that like kind of, I mean, I think there's a history, a developmental history of that, where men's unexamined mental and social emotional health issues are focused in on the only person that they can be focused in on, which is the partner in a relationship, which doesn't necessarily, that doesn't have to be a woman. It is a, you know, it is perhaps a, I don't know. I don't know what one could call that. You know, that's something that, you know, because there's partner violence in many types of relationships, but even with individuals who are in a relationship, you know, they're gay men, there can be one partner that is receiving the toxic outpouring of unexamined relationships from the other partner in terms of the issues that he has kind of experienced as a man throughout his life. And the difficulty there is that there is a particular, this cycles back to what we were talking about before in terms of the problem with boys, which is the name of a really good book as well. But the problem with boys, that boys come up in a way where there are also very strict parameters placed around them in terms of expectation, especially on a more granular level, right? Like in terms of a family's culture or a community's culture. And what I was trying to cycle that back into, because those issues are never really addressed, especially in certain cultural spaces like Black American culture, like there may be a real issue, or there is a real issue, but there may be an issue in very specific cases, like the case of your partner, Nadine. But the idea that mental health, the mental health of a man is not seen as something that is ever talked about, examined, looked at, or kind of considered in any way. So that individual carries into their adulthood and late adulthood some extremely negative toxicities, which unfortunately, in the case of Black American men, result in a great deal of violence, a great deal of destruction, and a great deal of incarceration, right? So what I'm trying to tie that to is something that we're going to cover in kind of a deeper essay down the road. But it's this idea that you brought up, Nadine, some time ago during one of our planning meetings, that there is a kind of deification of the Black male in family, right? In like the Black man, excuse me, Black man in this family or Black man in this community. And there's an elevation of that individual to the point where any issues that need to be addressed are never addressed, because there's always this sense of like, you're great, just like that. And then as that enters into a relational space, I imagine in your case, that was very like, okay, now you deify me and treat me like, and why are you bothering me with life issues and decision making and, trying to partner on with it? Just go deal with it. So do you feel like that is something that's another dimension to this, that there is I don't know, there isn't a space to examine? I mean, in this sense, I can't believe I'm concurring. I'm saying there isn't a space to examine men's developmental, social, emotional, mental health issues. And does that potentially result in a lot of problems for everybody else?
Hell yeah. Like, yes, bravo. Like, connection made. We need a light bulb right here. But yeah, that definitely does.
So it's painful because this is kind of going like why y'all gotta take it into this weird place, like men's rights and conniving bitches? Like, come on, man. Like, there's so much else. Like, we need to look at men's issues. Men have a lot of issues, but they also have a lot of privilege, and that privilege works against the examination of those issues. We got presidents and senators and congressmen and leaders everywhere, and they're all walking with a big glob of toxic masculinity backing up their system. And yet we can't look at that because no one talks about it. It's just, oh, it's men, they're fine. Like, but then this whole thing with this whole phalanx of men who are coming in with the, like, let's bring down all conniving bitches, they're not helping the case, man, at all.
Right.
Damn. Let's go a little further. I want to see these guys gather a little bit. Can we see them gather and deal?
Let's do it.
Okay, now they're going in.
सिस्टम में एक प्रॉब्लम सबसे बड़ी ये आ जाती है कि बिल्कुल अंधे हो जाते हैं वो। जब आदमी की बात आती है ना तो वो बिल्कुल चुप हो जाते हैं। बिल्कुल आप कुछ भी कहते रहो वो सुनने को तैयार नहीं होते।
पर स्टार्टिंग में अभी बहुत ही वर्नेरेबल कंडीशन है इस टाइम में एज पर नाउ। अगर हम शमी का केस लें या कोई भी केस ले तो वहाँ पे वो डिक्लेयर कर देते हैं दैट ही वाज अ रेपिस्ट और ही वाज
a SIF meeting and we have a forum of men.
So just speaking to that, throughout human history, even let's say the past 100 years of history, even like the past 50 years, even in like my lifetime, right? Just in my lifetime, in my experience, cross-cultural, a lot of different places, seeing things like in my relatively just, even in the field that I went into study and coming from an academic, open mind, you got to always look at the data. What does the data say? When it comes to a statement like, I don't know, man, it's like there's a rape charge and automatically it's just against the man. Like, bro, do you think there's a reason why that's happened over time? Like, do you think like there may be a reason why there's just the presumption of guilt like against that? I mean, like a different kind of thing there. Like if it's this idea of like, well, if a black man is being accused of a crime, he's automatically guilty. That's a reality. And that's a shit reality. That's a shit reality, and that is systemic injustice. But the general idea of women being raped by men is not something that we like, oops, like we got that one wrong. Like that exists. That is very real. There's also many men, unfortunately, who are predominantly incarcerated in prisons across this country, who are also getting very raped all the time, right now, in unnatural sexual situations, if you want to think about it like that. Like these people are thinking about, here's the problem. Yes, it could be that men are more raped than women are, but I don't know the data around that, but the idea is it's occurring in a particular place. And here it's just, I'm a woman and I left my house, or I didn't even leave my house. I didn't even leave my bedroom. I didn't even leave my comfy little bed when I was sleeping, because I might get raped there too, by Uncle so-and-so, my brother, my mom, my grandma, my dad, whoever. That is a woman's reality. So that's the problem. I'm not sure. Look at these guys. They're like listening, like, yeah, man. Yeah, you're right. Why is it automatically assumed that a man raped her? Like,
it is kind of weird when it's like, but like how many, like, can we have a show of hands? Like how many people there are like going through that exact like circumstance, or are we just gathering and talking about what other people, like what one person we know went through and like getting, I don't know, it just doesn't seem.
Let's see what they say. Yeah. Maybe they're all like, yup, happened to me, right? Like, yes, this is a room full of men who just statistically, quite impossibly, are all men who are accused of rape but completely innocent. Conniving bitches have entered into their life and said, how am I gonna take you down? Like, it's like that. It's remarkable that there's not like a kind of a sense-making lens there of like, maybe there's a reason why things are like this. It's not like we just imagined it, right? Like, so I don't know. Let's see.
Who claim that they are being harassed by the women they're separated from. So it's like an AA meeting, but of like aggrieved husbands.
And how much she is demanding?
So she has given me a list of 92 lakh rupees.
92 lakhs?
Yes.
So they have forged some documents. That's why there was so much abuse of law.
This chapter of SIF is run by Rupenshu Pratap Singh, whose primary job is to give legal advice to men who are in the midst of marital court cases.
On daily basis, we men record this biasness in our society.
So you're working against biased laws?
There was more than 40 laws which are for women.
Okay.
There was none, not a single.
So,
oh my God! I'm sorry.
There's some stuff that he's talking about here, right? Like, and I think
okay.
in many different places, but let's just take the US. There, again, don't have data, and even if we had data on divorce court decisions, findings for women, like the woman got the good end of things, financially, payment wise, whatever the case is, right? Custody, like that kind of stuff. This is another one of those issues like we were just talking about, right? If women were getting those particular women were getting those particular considerations made for them, the question then becomes, why would that be the case? Like, why would that, if that is a genuine lack of fairness, because I'm not sure justice or equity are necessarily, like appropriate terms in that case, but fairness, right, in judgment, like those were unfair judgments that have been made repeatedly over time. The question has to be why? Why are we getting into that? Let's think about certain factors, right? Let's think about factors that are, disparate factors when it comes to a woman's employment capacity, a woman's, which is to say, earnings, livelihood, being able to care for different, just kind of like care for, even if it's a 50-50 custody, let's say, but just care for her children and working towards that. The idea, and then, we go deeper into those spaces, like there's those considerations, and even just to say a woman continues to still statistically not make as much as a male counterpart in a particular professional space, same job, same position, same work, same title, right? So let's say just there's that consideration that a woman does not have the same earnings capacity as that man in that situation. But then there's the issue of, well, historically, what has been the ongoing bias, right? Like the consideration made for men in different spaces relative to, I don't know. I mean, considerations made relative to men and relative to women. This is actually, kind of what it was here. Cassie J, right? Cassie J had brought this up, and this is kind of what I'm trying to get to. Like, there is perhaps a traditional assumption, as she had stated, that women are the caregivers, so award custody to women. And she kind of hesitated after that and kind of was like, oh, yeah, I regret that one. That was kind of cringy of me to say, because that's not the real history, folks. The real history is potentially, and I'm saying this in kind of a speculative way, right? Like, I don't have data to back this claim up, but the history has likely been one of a disinterest in the children. So if there was any kind of a separation between a man and a woman, it's not like there are men clamoring for custody of their kids. Perhaps increasingly more so now, but traditionally that wasn't the case, and traditionally that hasn't been the case across cultures and countries, right? So in one sense, women have the kids and therefore need the support, the child support, to care for those kids, because they have other human beings to feed, clothe, and deal with. Nadine has come off her camera because one of her kids, you probably heard mommy, like one of her kids came in and was needing something. So, why don't you patriarchal fucks all deal and have some patience for a single mother taking care of her babies? How about that, you fucks? Well, sorry.
Damn.
I don't want to assume that anybody
came
is
in
like,
on
why
a
is
whim,
Nadine off the camera? But no, but that's the case. We're talking about the idea, like, what are the issues? Why do women get consideration through divorce court? Well, it's because I was saying, like, it's not like there's a lot of men clamoring for their kids. Usually men are fucked off and gone. So the women are more stuck with the children without any resources or help other than other women in the community or family, right? So there is that. So there may be a bias towards awarding women with more economic resources coming out of a divorce. I don't really think it's a fucking problem. I have been through divorce, and the way that my son's mom and why I refer to her as my son's mom, because that's like how I value her the most, right? Like, she is my son's mother. And so we arrived at a really strong co-parenting relationship that took a hell of a lot of work, a hell of a lot of consideration, hell of a lot of compromise, hell of a lot of acceptance. And the court didn't fucking help us with that at all. Like, we did that. Like it was a consideration that I made as a father and as a husband, as a man, to understand that I valued my son, and I wanted to be a part of his life, and I wanted to raise my child and raise him, but taking him away from his mother wasn't going to resolve that, nor was her just raising him on his own and me just, I don't know what I would do. I would then be like, okay, so there's a human being out there who has me as a father who's like, what a dick, where did he go? You know, like, it's not like this. I mean, that entire room full of men in this video may be like me, right? But I don't know that every woman in that room that is associated with each of those men is the conniving bitch who's trying to bring them down. I think there's a lot of reasons. There was a lot of reasons in my divorce that, you know, thankfully I didn't repeat the toxicity of my past and my being brought up in a certain way and my father within my marriage, but I was definitely an asshole. And there's a lot of stuff that I had to hold myself accountable for in order to get to where we are now, some years later, with a healthy family and going to basketball games and sitting together and being like, yeah, bro, good assist, you know, like, yeah. But not everybody wants that. So historically, yes, there are considerations made for women because that's what women have had to deal with.
Yeah, I will just say, I will just go in here as a person who like has no one, I don't, maybe people have like, maybe at some point like exes or something have been like, look, no bitch, but like I don't feel like they said that when they left the court room, definitely, because I'm just, you know, court wasn't a space, you're right, I went to mediation and it wasn't a helpful thing at all. Like, it wasn't at all what it sounded like, you know, and the court doesn't help in like two people coming together and being responsible for the care of, you know, people that they had to like, that they created together, you know. And I went away not having adequate like financial, you know, like I went away with nothing most of the time, and like constantly had to go and answer to court like another, you know, summons to explain why you even need this amount of money, and like until it was nothing, until I just couldn't fight anymore. And you know, I didn't have the resources to get a lawyer, you know, I didn't, you know, but you know, my ex at that time, like, he did have the resources, not even to get a lawyer, but just in his family, you know what I mean? Like, and I had to like fill out the paperwork on my own, which, if you know me and like the, you know, like that was such a difficult and traumatizing thing in and of itself. That was a lot. But I did that until I couldn't do it anymore, because raising children takes most of the time, and like I didn't have time to keep having these pointless battles just to lose anyway.
So in one sense, what you're also saying is, I don't know what all these people are talking about all the resources being funneled towards women, because I didn't see all that
at all.
I wonder if that has something to do with racial disparity. The more you know, it's like, you know, it's like you just have to like, I mean, come on, folks, let's start thinking intersectionally here. This is ridiculous. All right, let's see what he's further saying here.
But women do face violence per capita far more than men.
Who said that statistics? If you check about the NCRB data, you will find it, what is the true states and what are not.
But in general, violence against women...
You are saying in general because you have seen only the one face of a coin.
even this side of the coin seems very biased and anecdotal. While there may be enough men to fill in a room, like the number of women who have faced something like this, like I'm pretty sure it could fill up this block.
You can't say that women are 100% legitimate.
According to the National Crime Records Bureau, there are actually over 330,000 crimes against women in India every year. What's worse is that due to underreporting and lack of access, violence against women.
I like how, you know how they always say, like on a job, they're like 40%, clerical, 30% data mining, 20%, whatever, and then they have all the last 5% is other duties as assigned, which is a catch-all for everything. Yeah. I love that the catch-all on this, like assault, kidnapping, rape, dowry, death, cruelty by husbands is up here, like we're not even gonna classify it, just cruelty by husbands. That's what we're dealing with here. So that's amazing, right? That's amazing. Time to get women in India. Okay, let's see what more.
Horrible, yeah.
Is actually much higher than what the national crime statistics show. It's common for men's rights movements to deny statistics and data that speak to the gravity of issues facing women, to discount the need for laws that are designed to protect them. I met with Supreme Court lawyer Karuna Nandi, who has been a champion of women's rights in India.
I am gonna say, like in this last, let's just go here. The optics aren't great. Right? Like it's just seeing a group of dudes like pissed off and be like, yeah, conniving bitch. Like
this guy.
They're not awesome. Yeah, it's not awesome. It's not helping your case, fellas. It's really just not doing that well at all. But let's go here because I think yet again, this stream, Humanist Nightmare Fuel, there's a lot of Humanist Nightmare Fuel out there in the world, and I think we're gonna have to come back to many different versions of each of these, that we go into. But let's now enter into a real Nightmare Fuel space, right? To kind of bring us home today, right? No, hold on, Nadine, hold on, because this is 21 Studios, folks. This is 21 Studios. 21 Studios needs your support. I'm reading the description down here. To keep helping millions of men. Learn how at 21studios.com. Donate. Do you want to go there and check that out? Right?
Yeah.
22 convention founder Anthony Dream Johnson discusses why women need to get wifed up and knocked up to live happy. Right? So we're gonna go there because what we're dealing here with is, like, see, they were banned, right? Let's read about 21 Studios a little bit. 21 Studios and 21 Convention are under attack by big tech and the woke feminist establishment. We need your help to continue helping millions of men. Since 2006, 21 Studios has been creating positive media and events for men around the world, with all videos published free to the world, helping TED Talks for Men, in addition, blah, blah, these funds are best way to support. But what is 21 Studios, right? Like, what are we about? What are we about? Let's go check. Why is this? Oh, it's not letting me do that. Let me do this. Oh, Orlando, Florida, USA. We missed it. Oh my God. This was, man, look at these bros. These guys look fantastic. Look at this guy. He's like, that's how we're getting down. We are making men masculine again at this special live event. Ultimate convention for men featuring 100% mansplaining and nonstop masculine self-improvement. Those dudes in India didn't, like,
maximize.
This is where they have to come to, right? Like, this is the one. So anyway, we get a sense of what this, always extremely professional. One of the best things about attendees and speakers at the convention was their absolute contempt for frauds and fakes. Got a lot of awesome dudes.
I feel like they just wrote that themselves and put the leaves around it.
This guy literally has demon portal eyes at this point. Like, That's what they're going for. This
he was
guy's
born with
got
those
an
eyes.
awesome beard.
Oh my God, Duck Dynasty.
Yeah. Oh my God, do I look like a guy who would speak at a 21 convention? Oh no. I do, don't I? This is terrible.
What do you mean?
Ugh, I look like I could be one of these speakers, bro. Anyway.
Because they wear hats and t-shirts.
I don't know. It's something. Let's see what the 22 convention founder, and I guess 21 studios, 22 convention. I guess they could just go by the year, but let's see what they got to say.
So women need to get, when they're young, they need to get wifed up, knocked up, live happy. These are me and my nephews. I figured that would enrage all the feminists.
Dude, bros, he took such a measured, I'm going to take a drink and let that sink in. They love
Drama?
enraging. They love provoking. It's provocative stuff, right? Like this side of things is very, that's the problem. We've come such a long way from her, like, we need to consider the other side. And thanks, by the way, Cassie J, because you have helped them who have now yielded this guy. Do you see what his hat says, Nadine? Make women great again.
Yeah. Ugh.
Isn't that awesome? Do you remember when women were great? I don't. Terrible, I know. Just gotta see if we're paying attention here. All right, let's go see after this dramatic. Look at his.
You know what? Maybe you can speak on there, Suraj.
Look at this beautiful. Look at his chest hair. Oh my God, he's a beast.
He's a man.
Oh, God damn it. All right, let's go.
I say these things that are polarizing and offensive, but I really mean them, and I mean them in a positive way. For most women, this is going to be a much better option than trying to get an advanced education when you're super young and super fertile, which then drops off a cliff exponentially, and other health markers, biomarkers along with it. Strength training, like Jay talked to you about, will actually help resolve a lot of these, or basically slow down the process of aging in a lot of very useful ways, for beauty, for your health, for your skin, for your muscles, for your bones as a woman too, but then also fertility and these other issues. But still, women should, if they want to build a family, do it as soon as you can, young, wifed up, knocked up, boom. Hopefully in that order. But hey, shit happens. Live happy. I did talk about female happiness coming from women having a ton of sex with as much as they can with as few men as possible, but also comes from making cookies, sandwiches, and babies. I think this is a great thing. Women don't have to do this, but it's a pretty good life. I think women have been lied to about, Michael Foster again was talking to you about that, how the patriarchy is inevitable. You can go work at a job somewhere, some giant corporation or something, and they don't care about you, and they might fire you, and they won't think 2 seconds about you. Maybe someone you knew there that fired you will care about you, and that's it. And that goes away. Being
all right. I know it's a lot.
I've had a husband that's treated me the same way. What do you mean? Like, I'm so sorry, but it's like marriage is not a safety net. Like, oh my God! And telling young women to just get wifed up and knocked up. Are you kidding me? And fuck education? Oh my God!
Oh, why don't you pull your girls in here and let's just have them sit down and kind of receive some instruction.
Oh my gosh.
Let's do that, right? Because the internet is a very good educational space. Wow, yeah. So I want you to just let's go here. Let's digest this a little bit more. Let's keep going a little bit.
A mother growing a human being is a very unique thing. We can't do this as men. We obviously connect and breed, but you're the ones who grow the babies and nurture them and feed them and mother them. Parenting is too generic. Being a mother is very different from being a father and vice versa. This should not be missed. If, women that delay motherhood, like that article is talking about, delay, you could be missing out on children that would never exist. Maybe you have 1 or 2 kids if you delay motherhood to 37 instead of you having it at 27 or 21 or something. You could have 5 kids. Now we'll talk about unlimited babies here. I'm really proud of Michael Foster just banging out kids left as much as he can. He's got 7 now. He actually, it's funny because I interviewed him a few weeks ago for the first time, Michael Foster in the Redman Group, my podcast show. And he talks about how he says his wife doesn't like it, but I think she does like it. I think it's not right. I think she loves it, actually. He calls her his grape because she's like a grape he's going to squeeze into a prune. He's going to squeeze all babies out of her. He's got 7, which that's a lot of kids, especially today. But I think women should have unlimited babies.
I mean, that's heavy, man. There's some heavy, I don't know what everybody gets like when they're watching this, right? Like I'm getting such like this guy could switch on at any moment and start beating the shit out of his wife and kids, right? Like I get that. I get so much aggression. I get like, you know, he was just like, oh, you know, I you know, she says she doesn't like it, but I think, you know, I think she likes it. And I think she likes it. He just like went declarative.
And
then,
about somebody else's wife.
Yeah, and then talking about the grape and the prune. Holy shit, dude. Like this is, right, like you can't really, he did it with his hand too. He just did it with his hand. Like you can't really separate out narrative expression from narrative intention, right? Like there may be a, like I'm saying these provocative things and polarizing things, but I'm saying them for a good reason, right? But then everything else that you're communicating isn't really expressing what that good reason is, right? Like there's not like I'm still waiting. What's the good reason? Like, are you doing this for the good of women? Like you should really do. You might be missing out, but after that, conniving bitch, I'm gonna squeeze you like a grape, and I'm gonna just get all the kids that I can out of you.
Till you're a prune.
Till you're a prune.
But like, this is what I'm getting is like, it's that possession of like, we're basically the only thing we can't do. You know, you guys do all that shit. Like, so, you know, come over here while you're still young and
but
before
that's why
you
he
get
said,
educated.
It wasn't,
and
he's never said, let's have kids or things like that. He uses the word breed.
Yeah, yes.
Like,
it's just a mechanism to like take over the earth. It feels like, let me not jump to like,
well, you may not, but look, man, it's also not for nothing that the Make Women Great Again is a play on MAGA, which is a fully white nationalist, which are worried about the decreasing white race, and we need to like have lots of babies and get our white women. Like this picture right here is not really a picture that speaks of anything other than the repatriation of like white hegemony in the United States, as if it's gone anywhere.
She doesn't even have a head.
Yeah, she doesn't have a head.
She doesn't have a freaking head. It's just the bits they like.
It's
literally.
It's him. It's the baby. And she, the headless vessel.
Yeah.
Okay, let's keep going.
And when I say this too, this triggers the crap out of people, but it's a great thing. Women should have as many babies as they want without getting bullied. And that's another thing I see too. When I talk about women having a lot of kids, I think it's a great thing. And they should also, most likely put a man's preference for babies too as a priority, as an act of submission. That's what Michael's wife is doing, Michael Foster. He wants a lot of kids, and she's going along with it, but he's the one leading that relationship, and then she's his grape, and he's a squeeze her into a prune, which is pretty funny. But women also get bullied when they defend me on the internet about women having a lot of children and building big families. They get bullied, and feminists will deny this bullshit. Go on Facebook or Twitter and type 22 Convention or Make Women Great Again, and you will see vicious, nasty women that are feminists and just raging pissed off. And so it's BS. They really go after it. They say it's, building families and marriage. They call marriage now for women a lot of times. They call it internalized misogyny, internalized patriarchy. It's all bullshit. Babies and families and an awesome husband and a life like that make women happy. Certainly, this is a super viable path that I think most women are happy with. Much better than building some career at a corporation that thinks shit about you. No. You want to do that later, or build a business, or do something amazing? Choose wisely, because it can be done. Women have done it. Ayn Rand has said is a good example of that. Janice Fimengo is another one. But choose wisely. So I want to promote, and I have been, I think, building out throughout this speech, the new Motherhood First timeline.
How are you feeling about that, Nadine?
Surprised they must have got onto him and said, like, you need at least one picture of like Black people, or maybe there's because like they just want everybody to think like this. So that's true. But like, ew, man.
The man is the one,
man. Ew, man.
in
Just
charge.
leave me alone. But wait, hold on. Don't I have the uterus?
Yeah, but it's an act of submission. It's an act of, he
So I
literally
gotta
said,
submit the one thing that you don't have, the one thing that you need.
Yeah. So let's just look at this real quick, right? He's pissed about feminists calling marriage internalized misogyny, right? Like a woman is trapped in that space. She has no one to look at because she's married and she's a wife, and there's a social expectation on her, right? But then he says this, look at this.
So they really go after, they say it's, building families and marriage. They call marriage now for women a lot of times. They call it internalized misogyny, internalized patriarchy. This is all bullshit. Babies and families and an awesome husband and a life like that make women happy. Certainly, this is a super viable path that I think most women are happy.
So that makes women happy.
He's gonna squeeze all the babies out of her.
Yeah. So
he's got crap out of great thing as a priority, as an act of submission.
This is it.
Preference for babies too as a priority.
So he's saying, he just said it's not internalized misogyny, but he's now saying this about that guy in the crowd who's probably just cringy right now. Like, dude, stop talking about me and my wife, dude. Like, so this is what he says about that situation.
We put a man's preference for babies too as a priority, as an act of submission. That's what Michael's wife is doing, Michael Foster. He wants a lot of kids, and she's going along with it. But
it's an act of submission. It's an act of submission. Then he does the I'm holding your uterus.
The one leading that relationship.
He's leading the relationship.
She's leading. Squeeze her into a prune.
He's grabbing her by the pussy.
Yeah, grabbing him by the pussy. So how is it in the same span of 30 seconds he said it's submission, doing what he wants, and ending up a prune, but it's not internalized misogyny, right? It's like, well, bro, marriage may not be internalized misogyny, but because people think like this predominantly in marriages to varying degrees, then it is that. Like, I don't know what to tell you, man. It's like a weird, I don't know. All right, let's come here and let's take a quick look at, we don't even have time to get to Jordan, not Gordon. This was from an article site, right? It's called Security Distillery, and it's Introduction to Men's Rights, right? So this was back from 2019, Heather McDonald. The reemergence of men's rights activists in social and political contexts in recent years has posed new threats regarding national and international security. Through the utilization of the internet to further their ideology, develop a community, and radicalize others, these threats are increasing. Therefore, in order to understand the legitimacy of the threat posed by MRAs, it is essential to explore their origins, right? So that's a weird, kind of take on that, because now there's a real expression of codified danger. This is a risk, social risk. So members of the men's liberation movement who aligned with feminist principles established themselves around topics ranging from male circumcision to child custody. So that was the way in. They're oh, well, we're talking about, the men's rights part that is important, Similarly, this faction also aimed to debate and question the normalized patriarchal standards throughout society deemed detrimental to all genders. So it was, let's make friends with feminists first. We're sensitive, pro-feminist men, and then This faction supported the idea that gender stereotypes had created harmful circumstances within society for both men and women. However, those affiliated with the anti-feminist approach went on to reestablish themselves as men's rights activists, operating under a belief that they are victims of oppressive feminism, an ideology which must be overthrown through violence. For these individuals, gender stereotypes were a positive thing in society, and the reduction of them and breaking down of barriers was detrimental to men and masculinity. So there was like a quick turn in there, right? Like they're like, we're trying to come together with women. So maybe it was just like, let's go to women's studies classes and let's go to feminist, meetups, and let's maybe begin this process in trying to arrive at some sense of consideration for us as men. But then maybe that wasn't received well. I wonder why. And then because that's like Black Lives Matter, all lives matter. It's the same dichotomy, right, that we're looking at. So men's rights activists reflect an ideology and global movement which set out to question and stall women's gains at all levels, believing these gains have been awarded at the expense of men. That's the thing. We don't want to do anything about racism because we don't want to empower people of color because it will be at the expense of white people. Can't do anything because it'll be at the expense of, the people who are in the dominant position. Like, you're right. You're gonna have to like step off that. But why? Do you want to get knocked down off that, or do you want to just share privilege and like do it because it's awesome to do and because shit hasn't really worked? Like the 20th century, it wasn't that good. Do we really want to shit on this century too? How long do we have to wait until, we're already at the brink of another fucking world war and like another whole like thing with Russia? Like, we're bringing Russia-US conflict into this century in the way that it was. There's white nationalists that are just thinly veiled, like fascists, extremists, and neo-Nazis. Like, why do we want to do all this again? I don't understand. Didn't we already get the point? So MRAs hold the belief that feminism and therefore gender equality has gone too far, because here's the thing, equality can't go too far. It can go to equality, right? Like and we haven't gotten there yet. So
equality issue has gone too far.
Yeah.
What?
And in turn harmed men deeply. Certain subgroups such as the involuntary celibate, incels. We got to get to the incels thing, but not. We won't go there tonight. Who believe sexual relationships are a human right, they have been deprived of because of the normalization of gender equality and global feminism, have called for a gender revolt in the hopes of reclaiming a type of manhood rich in male and white superiority. Let's see what the Zimmerman, Shannon, who are incels recognizing the violent extremist ideology. These are some really good sources. We'll, of course, again, put the links down in the description. As we always put the credits down there for everything that we do, all the amazing resources that people provide, even the 21 studios. I mean, they produce something, so we are going to give them credit for this thing because we definitely want people to see what that shit crazy looks like. But, we'll put all that in there. But yeah, man, I mean, isn't that kind of like, this is a weird idea, right? Who believe sexual relationships are a human right. Whoa.
With yourself, maybe. Like,
whoa.
Yeah, you know what? And that's a real, oh my gosh. Let's rest on that for a second, because can I just say, there's so much, how many times, I'm gonna take it personal, get personal, but how many times I have heard, because I don't want to have sex with a man, right? And I'm just like, no, I'm good. However I say it, usually as compassionately as possible, but a lot of times it gets me into trouble. But I've been called oh, you stingy. Oh, you're selfish. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, excuse me? And it's that right there. Like that belief that sexual relationships are a human right.
Yeah.
Are you kidding?
Yeah, and
but then
folks,
what does that mean? So my right is to what? Let you like
submit,
or
like
not?
the guy said, like you said, submit.
Or not, because it's still the same. It could still be the same outcome depending on who you're dealing with.
Yeah.
Like that's insane. That is insane. The idea that my body is someone else's and that I should just continue to go along with that. I did go along with that for many years. I never thought that I had a different option. You know, I never thought in a different way, and I was raised in that way. And it's like, it's by, you know, you can't just say like, it wasn't just like a man taught me to be this way. That's not the case. Like it's women a lot of times teaching women, because we're like conditioned to like, you know, bring our kids up in this way, unless someone says, hey, wait, hold on, no, I'm gonna be radical about not continuing this harm. You know, for my daughter to think that her body is automatically someone else's and never her own. I've been in relationships where it's like someone will get mad at you for for getting yourself off. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to think of another way to say it, but like for having sex with yourself, like that's like, ugh, why would you do that? Like I'm right here, like why would you waste your energy on yourself? Wait, what? Like what? So that what's highlighted, like I'm so sorry. No, it's not. You cannot say that it's a basic human right to have a sexual relationship with someone else if they're telling you no, or if they're saying, you know, I'm like whatever they do with their body, like, you know what I'm saying, like for them to say no, like to say what's not going to happen with their body, that's, it's not your right to be like assert your dominance over them and be like, hey, nah, give it up.
Yeah, this is wow. Yeah, this is we're just, you know, everyone loves those iceberg analogies where this is just the top. This is just the top. There's a lot of developmental implications for this, and I like this article a lot because it is talking about how, you know, we have to see things in different ways in full context, because just like Cassie J was saying earlier, like there are some issues that have to be considered that are going under the radar because there are not really safe spaces for boys and men to explore or feel like there's even an opportunity to explore, in the same way that you may say, or I may say in different contexts, how we didn't have that access, but access to self-reflection relative to emotional, mental, philosophical health, it's not there, right? Like it's not provided. And so that, while important, cannot be somehow, and it's not being lifted up like, you know, anti-feminism because men need mental health care, right? Like that's not what's being said. It's sexual relationships are a human right, grape to prune, and, you know, like just submit, like that those are the messages. And what we want to explore developmentally as we move forward is intersectionality. Just like there's intersectionality in terms of different experiences that a human being may have that are very unique to that individual, there's intersectionality amongst, you know, spaces of radicalization as well. So yeah, we'll leave it here and come back to this whole men's rights activism issue a little bit down the road. So once again, Nadine Pueros, for you and for me, Dr. Siraj, we thanks for you to listen, all of you listening in. all of you who continue to listen in, and just if there's anything we can leave you with, it's just what we always like to say, right? Context matters. So always consider the context before you make a judgment about a particular thing. Go deep, but you know, there's definitely red flags when it comes to I took her from a grape and made her into a prune. Like that, like you don't have to give that much consideration of that. That pretty much speaks for itself. So.